Hello and welcome to another episode of Inside the Boardroom. I'm your host, Mel Schaefer. Summa Silver and Silver 47 are combining forces in a transformative merger that could reshape the U.S. silver exploration landscape. With projects across Nevada, New Mexico, and Alaska, the new combined company is setting its sights on becoming a dominant player in high-grade silver and other critical metals. Joining me now to discuss the deal and what's next is Galen McNamara, CEO of Summa Silver. Galen, welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks, Mel. Thanks for having me back on. Great to be here.
Let's kick things off with the big picture. What made now the right time for Summa to pursue this merger with Silver 47?
Well, you know what? It's really several factors. I think number one, big picture, I think it's a great time to be in silver. I see what's happening over the last little while in those markets, and really now is a great time for us to be growing. But more from the perspective of our both of our companies, I think that we were both collectively looking for merger and acquisition opportunities in the right space. And for this one, it was just a great fit for us. Two similar companies with similar philosophies. Number one. Number two, high grade. Number three, in the United States. So, like, there's just so few things out there in the silver space that, check those boxes that we thought it was a very good fit and pursued it pretty aggressively after we started talking early this year.
So, can you sort of walk us through the strategic vision for the combined company and what kind of scale and opportunity does this unlock?
Yeah. Well, you said it right there. Scale. I think scale is a really important word that really helps um, fundamentally underscores why we think that this is important and will be an important company in the silver space. Is that collectively we're looking at 236 million silver equivalent ounces in the inferred category and an additional 10 million silver equivalent ounces in the indicated category. So scale right there is quite strong. It's all over 300 grams per ton silver equivalent, so it's high grade. But really, in terms of that leads to my next point in that, like, two ways for us to grow. One is through the drill bit, which is what we're going to aggressively continue to do on both of our projects. But the other is through additional M&A, and we plan to continue to look at opportunities in that space as aggressively as we can. Number one, but going back to the drilling, we just feel that there's a great opportunity in Alaska this summer to materially add tonnage and therefore ounces to the resource base up there in a way that looks really good. And right now there's something like 165 million silver equivalent ounces at the Red Mountain project. Myself as a geologist, looked at it obviously very closely when we were first considering the transaction, but also have subsequently really dug into it. And I see a lot of growth opportunities there, a lot of significant growth opportunities. The mineralization is very wide open for expansion, and we plan to aggressively expand it. So, this summer, if by the end of this summer, the drill program that we do, if we can come up with a resource that instead of that has a one in front of it in terms of 100 million ounces, has a two in front of it, and we think that's within shooting, that's within shooting distance, you know. And if that's the case, then we think that it can support a very attractive PEA. So that's really like what we're doing right now, and we could really easily sit back and say, okay, like, we think we're undervalued relative to our peers on an EV per ounce basis, which is clear. We're at about 19 cents, and our peers at run up to north of $1. But we're not just going to sit on our hands and sit back and say, okay, therefore, people should buy our stock. No, we're going to aggressively pursue expansion and development on our projects.
So that's what I wanted to get into a little bit deeper next. Silver 47's Red Mountain project in Alaska will now sit alongside Summa's Hughes and Mogollon projects. How do these assets complement each other, and what excites you most about Red Mountain?
Well, you know what? Like, all three of them together, I think they're clear pathways to very significant, additional ounces there as we continue to drill and advance them. Number one, but number two, specifically Red Mountain. It's the type of deposit that, not to get too far into the weeds technically, that I know very well and have experience exploring in. Going back to the mid 2000s, and when you have a deposit that's that size, that number one on the deposit scale, it's open around the drill holes, so there's room for it to grow. But number two, deposits that are of that size, that are 15 million tons already, they don't sit alone. They don't sit alone. And Red Mountain, it covers basically an entire district that's not really explored in parts and then unexplored in other parts. So the big picture geological potential at Red Mountain is, to speak from personal experience, very significant.
So, Galen, the press release mentions critical metals like antimony and gallium. How important are these in the broader context of this deal? And can you talk a little bit about global demand?
Yeah, well, increasingly they're very important. And I think from a made in America perspective, they're very, very important. We get a lot of these critical metals from different places that aren't the first world, namely Africa and China. And I think there's an emerging investment theme, but also a focus from the current administration that has realized that, like, we need to be getting these metals from domestic sources. And Alaska is a very, very important part of, I think, the Trump administration's push for that. So this project, historically, hasn't really been recognized for things like antimony and gallium, but some of the more recent drilling uh, did assay for those metals and got some really compelling and interesting results. And we don't think that there's still a lot of work to do on those in terms of metallurgy, and understanding where they are in the deposit, but just high level, it's a really interesting part of this equation because antimony is really just coming back to what I hear in my my communications with other people in the business. American antimony is a very important thing that we need to be looking for. But gallium as well, and I'll give you an example. Gallium trades at about $1 per gram. I mean, we have drill holes that assay there, 80 grams per ton, 100 grams per ton. So it certainly has the potential to offset a lot of the costs and really add to the value, of the metal in the ground at Red Mountain.
If we just pivot a little bit and talk now about capital markets, you've announced a $5 million financing that was increased on June 3rd to $6 million. That's alongside the merger. How does that position the combined company heading into the second half of the year?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Mel, we didn't need to do any financing when we announced this deal, but I think collectively we saw an opportunity to fast track drilling in Alaska because of the things I just discussed. So we decided to do it within that context. Announced a $5 million financing when we announced the transaction, and then just very recently just increased it a little bit to 6 million because the demand was really strong, and we expect to close on the 6 million plus the 15% over allotment option for the brokers. So that's in total, that's 6.9 million.
And so, Galen, just finally, Suma's long-term vision has been about reaching 1 billion silver equivalent ounces in the ground. How does this deal help you advance that goal?
Well, I think from Suma's perspective, we started off with between 70 and 80 million silver equivalent ounces in the ground. We're now, as a collective company, as a pro forma company, we're getting pretty close to 250 million silver equivalent ounces. I think that aggressive drilling on all of our projects will really, really advance that over time. But again, we're also looking for additional M&A opportunities in the first world that are high grade, specifically in the United States that are high grade. And we just plan to just continue to, number one, aggressively drill out our projects, push them forward, push them forward. And then number two, look for other opportunities in the space.
Well, thanks so much for the insight, Galen. We'll be watching closely as this merger progresses.